Winning the Digital Catapult Challenge was the beginning of our journey to create an innovative solution to Watford Council's footfall counting problem. At this conference, Nick Wilcox discussed some of the technologies we considered.
There's no doubt in my mind that the most effective and most accurate people counter is this, the turnstile. But usually there's a gate at the side, isn't there? And the gate at the side is for the person in the wheelchair or the pushchair or whatever. And sometimes those gates don't get closed properly and people slip through and so on. It's not accuracy at any price, in fact. So the next sort of category of technology that we looked at was the brake beam. So essentially what you do is you fire a laser beam of some sort across an opening, right? And as people walk through that beam, it causes the beam to break and therefore a count. Okay. It's reasonably accurate, not as accurate as a turnstile, but obviously every time that beam gets broken, you get a count. So why didn't we go for that? Well, there are a number of inherent challenges. So the first one is you have to have a space that people walk through. So effectively, it's a turnstile without the whirly bit in the middle. There are other problems with this, of course, because normally you take quite a wide space. So we might, for sake of argument, put a laser across this room and measure people going through. But what we can't do is stop two people going through the beam at the same time, right? And you still only get one break and one count. So that's a bit of a challenge. The height at which you actually put that will make a difference to the count. So at that kind of height in that image, we won't get any kids because they'll all go underneath it. Yeah? Put it too low and then you'll count people's legs twice as they pass through it. So actually not very accurate at all. One of the technologies we are deploying is MAC address counting. So many people these days do tend to walk around with some kind of device on their person, be it a mobile phone or a tablet. There are ways in which we can filter those MAC addresses so that we know, for example, Hewlett-Packard printers always start with a MAC address of this or this, so we can discount those. But it's becoming now, you can see how we've moved from the turnstile, which is very accurate, to something that is less and less accurate as we go along. So on its own, we don't think MAC address counting is going to be an ideal solution. What we're doing is trying to recognise shapes to determine only whether that is a person or not. So that was kind of an interesting and encouraging result for us in terms of looking at, if we took an image, could we apply technology to analyse that image and recognise stuff. And some eagle-eyed people might have noticed we were also successful in recognising a bus, a van and a bicycle in the same process. Now, actually creating this bit of film reveals some very interesting stuff when it comes to this whole concept of counting and what is accurate. So it's not just about you've got to be standing face onto the camera and therefore it can say, oh, there's a head, there's two arms, there's two legs, that's a person. It's actually managing to pick people up when they're standing sideways, or even, as you see if you watch the edges from time to time, when they just pop into view and there's not even a whole person there. Okay? So the question is not, are we doing it accurately? Yes, we are. But the question is, how do we interpret those numbers? So now think about this camera pointing down a long street. And it picks up somebody at the far end of the street who's walking towards the camera for maybe 5 minutes. So how many times should we count that person? However, the technology so far, I think, is really, really encouraging, and I think we've got some very successful ways of doing this.
Nick has highlighted the pros and cons of the various technologies evaluated. We found by analysing the data from MAC address counters and image recognition, Geosprite is using big data techniques to combine the results to provide a far more accurate insight into Watford's footfall.